Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wa salatu wa salam ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Thank you for that warm welcome and for the invite. I was very excited when I saw the topic. I love topics that are challenging, that literally force me to go back and do some research on my own. I know that you guys as Muslim youth are tired of the mundane khutbahs and lectures that you hear coming out of the Islamic institutions, many of the Islamic institutions across America. They don't address our social issues. They are in many regards irrelevant to where we are currently in our social climate here in America. And I personally applaud you guys for even coming up with the topic, even having the guts to even, have or host myself to even talk about this topic. So with that, let me just say as a disclaimer from the very beginning that this talk is in no way, shape, form, or fashion designed to make anyone feel like a racist. That's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to point the finger at anybody. I don't want anybody to leave here in shame, holding your head in shame, because you think that some of what I'm going to talk about tonight applies to you. If you see what is going on, the whole purpose, if you guys are college students, if you guys are lifelong learners of the religion or in your secular pursuits of knowledge, it becomes a duty and a responsibility on you to change the social fabric that has encapsulated us currently. That's what your job is. Your job is not to learn so that you can perpetuate the status quo. Your job is to learn and to challenge the status quo with the knowledge that you have learned. And if that's not what if you're learning whatever subject matter you are studying so that you can get a good job and so that you can, raise your family and live, the American dream, then I really feel sorry for you, honestly. Because that American dream doesn't exist. Think about how many college students, college graduates that are out here now that can't find a job and that are wishing that they had went back to school and studied the thing that their heart so desired, and it doesn't matter how much money I make, I'm doing exactly what I love to do. And when you do what you love to do, you will never work a day in your life. So let me just lead with that. So racism is a term that as Muslims we like to dismiss under the guise that we have diversity in our religion. We have as a group people who adhere to the same religious beliefs and that we identify with a religion that has made discrimination of all forms haram, impermissible. So we'll run off the many Islamic texts from both the Quran and the practices and statements of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We'll run off the many texts that we know that emphasize the importance of unity and disparage disunity and discrimination, totally ignoring the reality that is staring us right in our face, and that racism, colorism, tribalism, all of the isms that you can think about that keep us fragmented and disunited, they exist. Don't ever say, oh, there's no racism in Islam. No, Islam has made discrimination and prejudice of all forms impermissible. But Muslims, there are some Muslims that are clearly racist. So don't use Islam to say or to dismiss the reality that is staring us right in our face, almost as if I'm crazy. It's gaslighting, modern day gaslighting. Oh, there's no racism in Islam. And it's like, but I just walked past 5 people, gave them the greeting of salam, and nobody returned the greeting of salam to me. And you want to sit here and tell me there's no racism in Islam? No, let's not do that. Because that is what is called aversive racism, which is another form of racism. And that is to act as if we're all Muslim, I don't see color, and we're all just of one faith. No. That's aversive racism. That's actually another form of racism. To deny, like, you don't see me. When you say, I don't see color, we're all Muslim, that's aversive racism, because last time I checked, I am color. I am color the last time I checked. And I have experienced discrimination and prejudice from Muslims the last time I checked because of the color of my skin. So don't say, oh, there's no racist, Muslims are not racist, as he just mentioned. No, this is what we use to assuage our own conscience, to make ourselves feel better. But the fact of the matter is that reality is not seeing things the way that we wish they were. Reality is seeing ourselves as we are. And the fact of the matter is that racism is alive and well amongst the ranks or amid the ranks of the Muslims. So one thing that we have to do before I kind of jump into that is that we have to make a distinction between institutional, systematic racism and individual racism. So let me start with the bigger form of racism, and that is institutional racism, systematic or systemic racism, which is expressed through a set of policies, institutional barriers, practices that unequally distributes resources, power, whether social, political, power, or economic, and opportunities to minorities, in contrast to those resources, opportunities that are given to whites. I'll say that again for the people in the back who didn't hear me. Institutionalized racism is expressed through a set of policies, practices, institutionalized barriers, right, that unequally distributes power, whether social, political, economic, opportunities, as well as resources, unequally distributes those things to minorities in contrast to the resources, opportunities, and powers that are given to whites, okay? If you still don't believe me, follow me, all right? These policies exist within institutions that effectually disadvantage certain racial ethnic groups, such as bank lending policies. There's something called redlining, if you didn't know about that. Bank lending policies where black people are not allowed to buy homes in certain areas, are not allowed to purchase homes at prices that are given to whites so that they can build generational wealth for their children and grandchildren. Many white people right now are living in homes that were handed down to them generationally from their grandparents to their parents, and now they own it. Parents have moved into smaller, condos because the children are all grown, gave the home to this one or to that one, and they rent it out to you and me for extra nominal, prices to rent it out while they go and get another house somewhere else. In many instances, African Americans, we are not afforded that type of opportunity. All right? There was a time when land was being distributed here in America. Black people were still slaves at that time. So the land and properties that were distributed to some of these big families in America, right? We were still slaves at the time when those lands and those properties were being distributed by the government. Saudi Arabia did the same thing. They distributed land to, more elite and upperclassmen of Saudi society, while the poor Saudis, have to, rent from this person and take, loans from this bank or that bank, putting their children, their great-grandchildren, children that they will never even see in a world of debt. It goes on in all countries. It goes on. Nonetheless, these are institution policies that exist within institutions that effectually disadvantage certain racial ethnic groups, such as bank lending policies, racial profiling. If you notice you hear downtown Manhattan, you don't see a cop on every corner, but you go to Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, you'll see a cop on every single corner. Every single corner. You go to East Orange, New Jersey, you're going to see a cop on every single corner. Bloomfield, New Jersey, is now being investigated because of the amount of stops and arrests and towing of people's vehicles. And guess who the majority of those people were? African American, Hispanic. You can't even ride through Bloomfield, New Jersey without getting pulled over if you're an African American. You guys following me? So I'm not crazy. I'm not making this stuff up. This stuff really does exist. All right, so racial profiling, barriers to employment. Don't you know that they will now discriminate against you if you have a Muslim name, right? If it's any name that's out of the ordinary, it's not John, Peter, Pete, or Mark, or any name that is, acceptable according to American, standards. You have a name like Zubair, which is my son's name, and I know he's been discriminated against. Sad kid. I'm sorry I named him that, but nonetheless, he has to live with that. You got to challenge the status quo. I mean, we name our children these names of the Sahaba, names of some of the prophets and messengers, and although it's the same name, you go in and fill out an application and you put down Isa, and they're like, no, we're not hiring. We don't even know how to pronounce that. Isa, Issa, we don't even know what that means. It's like, it's Jesus in Arabic, genius. How about I just put Jesus? So if your name is Isa, put Jesus on the paper. You probably will get hired. No, this is a fact. They discriminate based upon names. They can almost tell that, because as African Americans, we hyphenate everything. Shaquana, Sharia, Shanice. And then when they see that paper come on their desk, I'm not hiring this person. This is a fact. This is a fact. So we're talking about racial profiling, bank lending policies, barriers to employment, professional advancements, prison industrial complex, which houses 60 to 70% of the inmate population are African Americans. 60 to 70% of the prison population in America are African Americans, while we only make up 13% of the population. You do the numbers. Right now, a judge was just convicted in PA for a child, selling children to the system. He was just convicted, sentenced to 28 years in prison. That's it. Meanwhile, all of the tears that those mothers have shed when you sentenced their child, young black child, you sentenced him to a year, 2 years in juvenile state correctional facilities for incidents, for crimes that could have just gotten a slap on the wrist, could have gotten probation, could have gotten a second chance, but you had to keep the beds full in these private prison industrial complexes. And so you were selling children to the system. This is only one judge that got caught. You understand? A child comes in front of a judge for a simple misdemeanor, and rather than giving him probation or letting him go and, giving you a second chance, he's sent to prison 6 months, a year, 2 years. Meanwhile, his mother's shedding tears, got to go, take a bus. You know what it takes for a woman to go visit her child, whether in a juvenile correctional facility or whether in an adult correctional facility? You know what they have to go through just to go visit their children? The whole Saturday is gone just to go visit your child. The humiliation that they have to look through your pocketbook. God forbid you have woman products in your pocketbook and you have a male guard going through your pocketbook just to go visit your child. And this guy gets 28 years in prison, which he might come back on appeal maybe 5-10 years from now, get his sentence reduced, and we can never change the lives of those children that were destroyed as a result of systematic, institutionalized racism. Our country, believe it or not, was founded upon racism. Thus, most, if not all, of our institutions, whether economic, whether political, academic, educational, or even religious institutions, are embedded with policies and practices that are designed to protect and perpetuate white supremacy. Make no mistake about it. There are white churches, and then there are black churches within the same religion. And believe it or not, there are Indo-Pak Arab masjids, and then there are the poor black masjids in the urban areas that many of them will never step foot in, many of them will never get a dime sadaqah towards, but will spend thousands of dollars importing chandeliers from Turkey and expanding our masajid and going for a 3-day convention in the city of Baltimore, one of the poorest cities in America, right? And there are African-American masajid all over the city of Baltimore. Will go and ISNA, I'm calling names. I don't work for any of them, so they don't control my finances. Walillahi alhamd. The best thing that you could ever do is work for yourself. You don't owe anybody anything. I don't owe you an apology. I don't work for your institution. I don't work for your organization. I don't care if you don't invite me to your conferences or be a speaker on your platforms. I don't care. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as long as I speak truth to power, Allah will make sure that I have the platform that I need. You understand? Unfortunately, many students of knowledge and imams, they get caught up in this binary, they get trapped in these organizations, these institutes where they see wrong and they can't say anything about it because they control your paycheck. You are not the power. Why should people come listen to you? You're not the power. You're being paid to talk. You are not the power. Why should we be listening to you anyway? How about we just listen to the person that cuts you the check? Because that's the real power. Because you're only puppeting what they want you to say anyway. Don't kill the messenger. I'm just stating the facts. After I'm dead and gone, you guys can sort it all out. I'm here not to placate your feelings, but to lay out the facts, and then you can figure it out later on. You can sort through all of the mess afterwards. But our country was unfortunately founded upon racism. Thus, most, if not all, of our institutions, economic, political, academic, as well as religious, are embedded with policies and practices that are designed to protect and perpetuate the white power structure. This will help many of us, especially those of us who migrated here to America or whose parents migrated here to America. And they come with this mentality that has been shaped by the same white structures. And, that has influenced the world, that black people are somehow lazy, unproductive, and criminally dysfunctional. And as a result of that, they will never progress like other minority groups. How many of you have heard either your parents or family members say, black people will never, they've been in this country all of this time. We only been here for 20 years and we have a store and we have a house and you've been to college. All of my children have been to college. And black people have been here all of this time and they're never going to progress. So almost as if we are just inherently dysfunctional people. Not even looking at all of the institutionalized racism that keep us marginalized, that keep us exactly where we are. There's a few that slip through the cracks, but they are an exception to the rule, not the rule. You understand? And it breaks my heart when you hear Muslims who are so shallow in their thinking and their understanding that you can't see past, what's in front of you. That you would make a statement like black people have been in this country for all of this time and they still haven't progressed as a people. Many Arabs and Indian countries, South Asian countries, were colonized by the British. I'm going to give you a quick history lesson, if you didn't know, okay? And of course, just follow along. So many of these countries were colonized by the British. Egypt, for example, was a part of the Ottoman Empire until it fell under the British rule in 1914, all right? And we all know that Britain has had an influence, strong influence on the Gulf states. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Kuwait. These are the Gulf states. And we are aware. Has anyone ever lived there for a substantial amount of time? Do you not see the Eurocentric worldview that Arabs have, that everything that is white is right? As a matter of fact, they advertise when they want teachers to come over there and teach English, they advertise for white teachers only. Absolutely. I was over there as an African-American Muslim, mind you. And my white counterpart, who has less credentials than I have, will be given a higher position simply on the basis of the color of his skin. As a Muslim, they still treat you like crap. Many of them don't even acknowledge you as a Muslim. Don't even acknowledge you as a Muslim. So we're aware of Britain's influence on the Gulf states as well as South Asians, meaning India, what we know today as Pakistan and Afghanistan and all of those areas over there. Educational institutions back then were established that inculcated the value of British presence in those regions under the guise of modern education. And modern education had less to do with disseminating scientific, rational thinking and more to do with an acquiescence to the West's superiority. To the degree that many began to adopt the Eurocentric worldview and became thoroughly convinced of the West's superiority, even at their own self-denigration and inferiority. Let me translate that for you in modern vernacular. White, everything that is white is right. Understand something. Many of your parents that grew up in these areas, go back and look at the history books and what they were taught as they were matriculating through their school systems. White supremacy was embedded in their education. So while they may not have been taught that, black people are slaves or black people in America are descendants of slaves, when you see white, everything white is right, everything other than that is wrong automatically by default. Understand how they have been programmed. You guys are getting a different education, and I'm hoping that critical thinking is a part of that. All right? But for many parents that come from those regions, unfortunately not. So much of the thoughts and ideas that many who migrate from these regions to America have about black people, in addition to the way that we are portrayed in the media, is going to be negative. All right? The media, cinema, has greatly influenced the way that people see and subsequently treat African Americans. And this translates into individual racism. So that's the institutionalized racism. I want to show how that trickles over into individual racism. Because now people who grow up in those regions, and, let me just share something with you real quick. I lived in Saudi Arabia for about 8 years of my life. Almost 7 years as a student of knowledge, and then I went back and lived in Riyadh for a year, and I taught at King Saud University, all right? During my entire time there was not a cab that I got in, except that the cab driver, Arab, who would ask me, where are you from? Min ayna ant? Where are you from? And if I say, Ana min America, I'm from America. He said, La, illa, no, you are not. I said, no, I'm from America. La, illa. بل أنت من سودان أو شيء كذا أنت من أفريقيا كذا. Meaning basically, nah, you either from Sudan or you're from somewhere in Africa. I said, no, I'm from America. No. So let me ask you a question. Why did he refuse to believe that I was from America? Because I was not white. Why would a Saudi believe that the only people who can really be considered Americans be white? No, go deeper than that. They're not necessarily taught that. Not necessarily in those words, but the Eurocentric world view. This is a Bedu, like you're not gonna engage in a conversation about the history of America and the natives that were here before, but they have bought into the whole idea that Christopher Columbus discovered America. You gotta be kidding me. Christopher Columbus, and we still have Columbus Day. Christopher Columbus discovered America? So there was nobody on this entire continent. There was nobody here. And then Christopher Columbus just so happened to stumble over, a wave or two and land on Plymouth Rock. You gotta be kidding me. The greatest lie ever told. Next to the devil doesn't exist. Greatest lie ever told. So there was nobody here, just foreign land, nobody here, not unoccupied, and we're gonna come here and we're gonna establish. The natives were here, and they called them Indians because they thought that they were in India. They did not discover America. And the original Americans are not white. You follow me? That wallah al-azim, for the whole entire duration of my stay in Saudi Arabia, there was not a cab that I got in except that the conversation always started with, where are you from? And I say, I'm from America. They said, well, what's your asl? What's your nationality? Where are you originally from? I say, I'm from America. I said, no, where are your parents from? Born and raised in New Jersey, both of them. No, where are your grandparents from? My grandparents is from North Carolina. Oh, no. You're from Sudan. You're from somewhere in West Africa, East Africa somewhere. He will not accept it because they have been taught with this Eurocentric worldview. And many of those elders, some of them are your parents. Some of them, unfortunately, are your parents. And your job right now, because I am not going to change the way that they see me, but you can. It's your responsibility when you hear your parents use phrases like abid, or abd, or zinji, all of these derogatory phrases, which in fact means, zinji means nigger in Arabic, for those of you who've never heard the term before. Abid, slave, all right? All of these phrases, you hear your parents, you hear your uncles, your relatives use these, immediately it becomes your responsibility to challenge that. Excuse me, what did you just say? No, don't use that phrase around me. Don't use that around me. It becomes our responsibility now to change the narrative. Otherwise, you're being complicit in, an act of transgression makes you a transgressor. So, when we're talking about now how this translates into individual racism, where the actions, beliefs of superiority, and attitudes of a person are characterized by race, cultural preference. This manifests in many ways in the Islamic community individually, such as refusal to give someone the greeting of salam. This just happened to me. I was coming out of a restaurant, two Palestinian brothers who looked like they were actually homeless. Right? And I'm walking with my wife. They stood right there, never gave the greeting of salam, nothing. That even on your worst day, I'm still not deserving of the greeting of salam. And you're going to say, well, there's times that I've had a thobe on, and I walk into a store, and a brother will say, you Muslim? It's like, well, what the hell else would I be with a thobe on? What else would I be with a thobe on? Please tell me. Oh, mashallah. What is mashallah? Like, what if I was a second, third generation Muslim? That would be an insult because it's like I didn't convert to Islam. My parents were Muslim. My grandparents were Muslim. My wife is a third generation Muslim. That would be an insult, almost as if everyone that is here kind of converted to Islam, that we don't have generational, spirituality. It's an insult. It is. To automatically assume that when you run into someone that he's not really a Muslim. Let me see. Even in Saudi Arabia, they would always ask when I go to gatherings, you married? Yeah. Mutazawij? Yes. A Muslimah? Are you married to a Muslim? It's like, who marries a non-Muslim? I mean, today people do, but when I converted to Islam 20 years ago, that was unheard of. That was unheard of. Muslim men were not marrying non-Muslim women. It was unheard of. But why would you ask me a question like that? Why wouldn't the default be, he's a Muslim, he's married to a Muslimah? Because the standards, the way that you look at me is totally different than the way that you look at the rest of the Muslim world. Not refusal to give the greeting of salam, lack of acknowledgement as a Muslim, believing that they don't know much about Islam. It's like, oh, mashallah, you speak Arabic very good. It's like, what does that mean? I speak Arabic very good. You don't speak Arabic at all. Wallah al-azim. You don't speak Arabic at all. You speak Ammiya. That's not the Arabic of the Quran. You don't speak Arabic at all. You speak a dialect of Arabic that was, deduced from the classical Arabic language, because you don't understand the rules of Arabic in order to have a proper conversation in the Arabic language. You don't understand the rules of Arabic to have a proper conversation in Arabic. So, and I'm not saying that in a derogatory fashion, but when you say to someone, oh, mashallah, you speak Arabic very well, it's like, well, I learned Arabic as a language. Like, why wouldn't I speak it very well? I mean, no one would say, I wouldn't say to an Arab who speaks English, oh, you speak English very well. You learned the English language. You got it. Because it's not said from an encouraging standpoint. That's different when you say, mashallah, tujid al-lughat al-arabiyyah, like you're very exceptional, you speak Arabic very well, as a form of praise, but it's said in a very derogatory manner. Almost like, when white people say, oh, you speak proper English. Well, you must be I remember I was in the Whole Foods and I was having a conversation with my son, and the lady at the counter, she said, you must be a teacher or something. I said, why? I said, why? Because I speak proper English? She said, no, I'm not saying that. No, you are saying that. It's okay. Say it. Say it. I'm not offended. I'm not offended because I enunciate correctly. You can hear all of my syllables and my consonants. Like, that makes me a good Negro. You're an educated Negro. It's insulting. It's no different. It's insulting. So we have to be mindful of how these little subtle forms of racism comes out in our interactions with people from other ethnicities or other cultures. And, this individual racism, it has a propensity to transcend the individual level to become a more institutionalized level in the Islamic community, such as Islamic organizations and institutions who intentionally refuse to acknowledge the scholarship and leadership of African American Muslims. All right, you have all of these huge organizations, this one, that one, these orgs, these institutes, this institute, that institute, and they do these 3-day lectures, these conferences and conventions, and not one African American speaker. So either you're saying that African Americans are not competent enough to sit on platforms with many of your scholars, Sheikh Fulan, Shuyukh, right? That we're not competent enough to sit on those platforms, or we are not a part of the narrative. It's only one or two things, because I can't figure for the life of me why ICNA would have an entire 3-day convention in Baltimore, 23 scholars on your list, and only one African American speaker who is Imam Siraj, who's only there to fundraise. With all due respect to the Imam. He's not there to educate. He's there to raise funds, millions of dollars. And then after the 3 days is over, you pack up shop, you leave Baltimore, and you don't drop a dime and many of the masajid that are in the city of Baltimore. And you just, in the 3-day period, you've raised millions of dollars. Now let me ask you, what would the Prophet ﷺ do? Did he ever go into an environment and see poor, disenfranchised, underprivileged Muslims and just completely ignore them? Or did he give everything he had? There were poor Muslims who used to live in the masjid called Ahlul Saffa. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Abu Hurairah, all of them used to live in the masjid. Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, Ali's older brother, used to go to the masjid and give them everything he had in his house. He used to feed them, to the point that Abu Hurairah said, I don't know anyone who is more better of the Sahaba after the Prophet ﷺ than Ja'far. He gave precedence to Ja'far over Abu Bakr, not because he believed that he was better, but because Ja'far used to cater to the poor, unlike anybody else. The Prophet ﷺ never ate from charity. He would only eat from a gift that was given, a personal gift that was given to him. This was one of the ways that Salman al-Farisi recognized that he was actually a prophet, that he didn't eat from charity. Every time some charity was given to him, he would find the poor Muslims and he would give it to them. We go into one of the poorest cities in the United States, hold a 3-day conference, raise millions of dollars, and pack up shop and leave the city and give not a dime to one African American Muslim masjid, minority masjid in that city. How could you live with yourself? How could you live with yourself? leadership, acknowledgement, not refusal to acknowledge the leadership and scholarship of African American Muslims, Islamic organizations and institutions who offer little to no assistance to African American Muslim communities, whether in the form of religion, right? With all of the qadis and people that we are, importing from, Egypt and other places during Ramadan, the African American Muslim masajid, we gotta pick some brother who can recite a little good and let him read from the Quran. We don't get, we're gonna send a brother over to you. Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he sent Abdurrahman ibn Muljam to Egypt to go teach the people in Egypt the Quran. He said to Amr ibn al-As, who was the governor of Egypt during that time, he said that I'm sending you Abdurrahman ibn Auf, even though I need him here in Medina myself, but I'm sending him to you to teach the people in Egypt the Quran. And this same individual, Abdurrahman ibn Muljam, is the same man who decapitated Ali ibn Abi Talib, cut his head off. The same man who killed Ali ibn Abi Talib is the same man that Umar ibn al-Khattab sent to Egypt to go teach the people in Egypt. Where do we see that today, where Muslim masjids who have a plethora of qadis, of qurra, and send them to the more disenfranchised masajid during the month of Ramadan to help you guys out? Free of charge. You ain't got to pay him nothing. Here's one of our qadis. Let him come to your masjid and lead the salat. We will take care of his accommodations. We will take care of his money. We'll compensate him. But we want you guys to be able to benefit from something that we can offer. Nothing. Meanwhile, you importing imams in from Egypt and from other places, Morocco, to come, beautiful recitations. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, we're struggling. We don't have reciters in our masajid. We have the best from amongst us who can read the Quran in Arabic and stand and read from the book, which many people don't, necessarily. I mean, when you're reading from the book, it's different when you're reading from your heart. Sounds different, comes out differently, resonates different. Even as it relates to in the form of, academic, helping out academically. All of the institutions tend to focus on their own, all of this institute and that institute. They don't ever come to African American communities. They don't ever offer their services. But we'll go and we'll rent out a university, a college, and we'll do 3-day, the fiqh of chilling and all this other stuff, and then we'll invite, and we're just going to party, order pizza, and we're going to take thousands of dollars from your parents, to babysit you for the weekend, and then we're off to the next city. This is what Islam has become in America. This is where we are. Tell me that this is what the Prophet ﷺ did with his Sahaba when he educated them. He sent them out to the people to go educate the people. You don't get to pick and choose whose community, whose city, whose place you're going to go to. We go and we choose the most ignorant of the people, and we go and we educate them. Because the most ignorant are the ones that are the most thirsty. The people who are more privileged, you don't think they don't give a damn about Islam. They don't care about learning about Islam. My parents told them they paid for the 3-day event, and I'm coming here to be babysat for the next 3 days. They're not going to change anything. They're not going to challenge anything, but you go into the poorest environments, and you will find that those people are the most thirsty for knowledge. I'm one of them. Opportunity was extended to me, and look what became of me as a result of that opportunity. Thirsty for knowledge. And my thirst for knowledge has not stopped since then. As they say, طلب العلم سهولة الدخول صعوبة الخروج. That seeking knowledge is something that is very easy to get into, very difficult to get out of. Because once you get a taste of knowledge, you can't let it go. Once you get a taste of thirst for that, you quench that thirst, you can't let it go. Up all night reading, back hurt, eyes losing vision in your eyes because of your thirst for knowledge. Financially, we take our zakat, all of these big organizations, and we'll help out the latest tragedy or catastrophe. If it's Syria, then we're going to take our zakat funds and give it to Syria. If it's Yemen, we're going to do a whole fundraiser for Yemen. Meanwhile, you got poor Muslims right here. You got to be kidding me. You will raise money for Yemen for a catastrophe that just happened. And you have poor Muslims, disenfranchised Muslims here this entire time, and you have never once did a fundraiser for them. Masajid have closed down as a result of not having adequate funding. But we'll collect millions of dollars and then boast that we went to Burma, we went to this place or that place, and mashallah, we helped them build a well. And while all of that is great, many of the scholars of Islam are opposed to what is called naql zakat, taking your zakat and taking it outside the boundaries of your own residency. Zakat should be paid in your residency first. You take care of the people that live in your vicinity first before you take your zakat and go beyond the boundaries of where you live. How do you skip right over the poor people that are right here and go all the way to, this place or that place? And I'm not saying giving zakat to Muslims that are struggling in other countries. I'm not saying anything is wrong with that. But I'm saying to intentionally overlook those poor, disenfranchised Muslims that are right here in your own vicinity and go after, the more, because it makes us look good. It's all about how we look in front of the community. MashaAllah, we just donated $2 million, to this, camp or that, camp, and it makes you look good. MashaAllah. Applaud you. MashaAllah. But how is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala going to see you that you intentionally overlooked people that you could have helped right there in your vicinity? And you went for, because of, and believe it or not, a lot of it, especially with the 501c3s, is a tax write-off. You give your sadaqah, you get your W-9 form, you fill it out, you get the person to fill it out, you get your money back during taxes. So it really ain't charity anyway. So let's be honest about this. Charity. Is it really charity? Are we getting that back when we collect our taxes? I've gone to institutions who have paid me and then give me a W-9 form to fill out. I fill the W-9 form out. You get that back at your taxes. You didn't pay me anything. You didn't pay anything. Because there's a lack of trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because if you really believe that Allah was going to pay you back, compensate you for what you gave, I'm not going to write it off on my taxes. That was for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this is the game that we play. But then we'll come in front of you and say, I donated this amount or that amount. No, you collected that back on your taxes. So really, you didn't give anything. And you might not even have a reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You might be jeopardizing your akhirah. And it's time for salah. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to pray, and then we'll come back. And I have one last piece that I need to give you guys before we leave, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. If you have time, please come back and hear at the last portion of this, bi'idhnillah. Jazakumullahu khairan wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. Okay, so let me just give you how the manifestation of how the individual racism transcends the individual and becomes institutionalized racism. Another manifestation of this in recent times, for those of you who are not aware, is how scholars from Saudi Arabia, unfortunately, not all of them, but many of them, have completely ignored and dismissed any inkling of Islamic scholarship or intellectual competence, for that matter, amongst African American Muslims. This has taken the form of, has taken on the form of Islamic rulings and edicts issued and superimposed on African American Muslim populations, predominantly new converts, without consideration of their condition, socially or otherwise, or those who assume roles of leadership over them. This has contributed to our own psychological programming as African American Muslims, believing that anything that is Arab is all automatically better than who and what we are. We will automatically assume that because you know Arabic or because your origin is an Arab origin, that you know more Islam than I do or we do, or that you're more knowledgeable of the Quran than we do. And let me just say this for the record. And those of you who have Arab origin, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Many Arabs that come from Arab countries, just because they know Arabic doesn't mean that they know the Quran. As a matter of fact, one has absolutely nothing to do with the other. There was actually a video that I was watching on Instagram where a guy was walking around asking Arabs to, I don't know if you guys know that this is off, it's off. But I don't know, did you guys see that? He's walking around asking Arabs to recite Al-Fatiha. And one guy actually started singing nasheed. He didn't even know Arabic. He didn't even know Al-Fatiha. And you know what I mean? It's really sad. It's really sad to find that someone who comes from, and I mean, it's normal for me because I've lived in the outer world for many years, so I see the normalcy of it. But for some of us who converted to Islam, we kind of over-exaggerate the fact that you are of Arab origin, so that automatically translates to you should know the Quran. And one has absolutely nothing to do with the other, all right? Many of them are just as ignorant of the Quran as we are. But because of our own psychological programming, if we are in a masjid, 3, 4, 5 people about to pray, and one of them is Arab, we will automatically push him up to lead the salat because we automatically assume that because he's an Arab, he knows Arabic, he knows the Quran. And nothing could be further than the truth. So look at how that has impacted us as African American Muslims, believing that sometimes we are more inferior. And I've had many Arabs tell me, you know, like, you guys are converts to Islam, Muslims here in America, you guys are much better practicing Muslims than we are. Our practice of Islam is usually very culturally nuanced. You know, we say things are haram not because Allah said they're haram, but because, you know, in our country and our culture, it's haram. We've made it haram, which is actually haram. To say that something is haram that Allah did not say is haram is haram. Because now you have put yourself in a position of being the legislator. All right? And Allah says in the Quran, وَلَا تَصِفُوا بِأَلْسِنَتِكُمُ الْكَذِبَ هَذَا حَلَالٌ وَهَذَا حَرَامٌ لِتَفْتَرُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ كَذِبًا. And do not say with your tongues that this is halal and this is haram without any evidence from Allah, inventing a lie on Allah. When you say, oh, that's haram, that's haram, and it's not actually haram in the Quran and the Sunnah, then you are actually saying that Allah made something haram that He didn't. That's cultural Islam. That's cultural Islam. And so it's very important for us to be aware of that. But to the degree that, you know, we've never even challenged, a lot of these Saudi scholars have imposed certain things on us, telling us not to pray at this masjid because of information, secondhand information that was brought to them about this masjid or this imam, not to listen to this person, not to listen to that person, and they're steady issuing edicts and verdicts that they would never do to another country. But because we're African American Muslims, they don't regard us, they don't see us as being worth anything of any value, so they can just issue verdicts and we're supposed to follow it. And unfortunately, there's a fraction from amongst us who we take everything they say as if it's revelation from the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ, he emerged amid a culture of people that were wrapped and saturated in all forms of racism, classism, tribalism, and discriminatory practices and traditions and behaviors, both intraculturally and interculturally. Meaning Arabs, they were being discriminatory amongst themselves. As many of you are aware that if you are darker skinned, you have a darker skin complexion, you are somehow less than. In Saudi Arabia, the darker skinned Saudi women, their dowries are much lower than the more fairer skinned Saudi women. This is a known fact. Anybody who lives in Saudi Arabia knows this. It goes on everywhere. I'm almost positive it does. But I don't have experience everywhere. I lived in Saudi Arabia for almost a decade, so that is my reference point. And I've seen a lot of things that, you know, just blew my mind living there. That somehow because you have darker skin, that kind of makes you less valuable. So your dowries are kind of a little lower than those who have fairer skin. It's ridiculous. I went to Trinidad and Tobago, and the lighter, fairer skinned Trinidadians look down on the darker, you know, skinned Trinidadians, almost as if they're, you know, non-existent. Ridiculous. And it's really sad that we have allowed this into our ummah. We have accepted this as okay. And it's not okay under any circumstances. My wife wrote a book. It's called My Brown Skin is Beautiful. It's a children's book. But it's also highlighting, underscoring the fact that a person's value should not be attached to their skin color. I'm not somehow less than
I remember we were doing a fundraiser for Ibtihaj Muhammad. We were doing a fundraiser in New Jersey for her to go to compete. And we had to do a fundraiser because the Olympics were not paying for her parents to go. So we did a fundraiser for her in Newark, New Jersey. And while fundraising, we were fundraising for $50,000 so her parents could go with her to the Olympics. So particular organization, ISNA, I'm just going to say it because it was public, sent someone there with a donation for it. Guess how much they said? We're trying to raise $50,000, right? Guess how much he came with? $700. And Imam Malik was actually giving the talk at the time, and he was doing the fundraiser, and he looked at the guy and he said, what organization are you representing? He said, ISNA. He said, you guys sent $700 here. We're trying to raise $50,000. He said, the sad thing about it is that I know you could give more. He said, and the sad thing about it is that if she was a white female convert, we wouldn't even be having this fundraiser. If she was an Arab, we wouldn't even be having this fundraiser. Because she's an African American going to compete in the national in the Olympics, we have to fundraise and do all types of, asking for money from the Muslim community. When in fact, if she was a white convert to Islam, because of course nobody loves white converts like the Muslims do, right? No, I kid you not. I've literally been in a masjid where a white convert takes shahada, we walking up to him, putting money in his, Allahu Akbar, takbir, putting money in his hand and, mashallah. Probably give him one of our daughters. African American convert to Islam, it's just like, mashallah, brother, inshallah. Inshallah, you become a good Muslim, inshallah. Meanwhile, 3, 4, 5 years go by, the same young African-American male in the same community, not one person will walk up to him and ask him, hey, how you doing? Do you know Al-Fatiha? Are you married? Right? Ask any African-American who attends a masjid that is predominantly Arab or Pakistani and ask them, will they ever get married in that masjid? Never. Whether male or female. Never. And that's sad. Even one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, Julaybib, who used to be a slave, who was of African origin, the Prophet ﷺ asked Julaybib, are you married? Julaybib said, who would marry their daughter to me? Who? And the Prophet ﷺ went to one of the Ansar, said, give me your daughter for marriage. The man said, I would love for you to be my son-in-law, O Messenger of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ said, I'm not asking for your daughter for me. He said, who are you asking for my daughter for? He said, for Julaybib. He said, Julaybib? I would never marry my daughter. He said, let me go talk to my wife. He went to the woman. The woman said, wallahi, I would never marry, over my dead body, I would never marry my daughter to Julaybib. The daughter came out and said, if the Prophet asks for my hand in marriage to a man that he feels comfortable marrying me to, who are you to come in between that? That is for you guys. Love doesn't have a color attached to it. And stop letting your parents dictate to you where you're going to find love. Marrying you to your cousin, marrying to you a distant cousin, and this is a person you grew up with your entire life. I got to marry this person? La ilaha illallah. Your parents are going to put a hit out on me. There's going to be a bounty on my head. I hope I have an Abu Bakr to hide in a cave with me somewhere. No, I mean, it's serious. It's ridiculous, man. And the only way that is going to change is when you guys change it. You guys have to change that. That's not going to change by itself. The Prophet ﷺ did not become the man that he became simply because he acquiesced to the status quo. He changed the status quo. He challenged the status quo. And that is why he was chased out of Mecca. That is why there was so much hatred. There was so much slander, everything surrounding him. Not because they had a problem with him personally. He was challenging the status quo. And if that is not what your knowledge is pushing you towards, then maybe you should, not seek knowledge, because that's what your knowledge is supposed to do. The Prophet ﷺ emerged amongst people who were wrapped in all forms of racism, classism, tribalism, discriminatory practices, and traditions and behaviors, both intraculturally and interculturally, based upon a plethora of factors, including gender, including race, and all of the other factors that they use to separate or to decide whether a man was worth something. Cultural, social, economic statuses, all right, whether a person was free or slave, as well as the continuance of the hegemonic rule, the hegemony, the elite of Mecca, all of which the Prophet ﷺ challenged openly to level human beings while challenging the gauge by which we judge one superiority over another. The ayah that he read earlier, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكْرٍ وَأُنثَى وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. Allah says, O mankind, indeed we created you from one male and one female, and we spread from that one male and one female different nations and tribes, لِتَعَارَفُوا, so you may acknowledge one another. Not that you may ignore one another and say, we're all Muslim, I don't see color. Well, I was raised not to see color, as if that makes you somehow better than a person who does see color. I would more so respect you if you said to me, I see you as African American, or I see you as this, or I see you as Hispanic, I see you as that. I respect that. But to say, I wasn't raised to see color, I don't see color, we're all Muslims, that's an insult. That is an insult. Allah says, Li ta'arafu, so you may acknowledge one another. Appreciate the diversity of God's creation. The different colors. Just like we look at trees as, the leaves are growing and we see brown, we see purple, we see all these different colors. This is exactly the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. But we want to favor this one over this one because of this color and that color. That's not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put us here for. Reverence of Allah, taqwa. As Allah mentions in the ayah that inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, that the most noble of you in the sight of God is the one that possesses the most reverence of God. And taqwa cannot be measured by how you look outwardly, how much you pray. That's not how you measure taqwa. The only one that can measure taqwa is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's no need for us to decide who's better than who. We leave that up to God. We leave that up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah says in the Quran, فَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ هُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِمَنِ اتَّقَى. And do not consider yourselves purified. Don't self-sanctify. Allah knows who fears Him. God knows who fears Him. But the Prophet ﷺ, he challenged the status quo. This is why during Hajj, do you know why during Hajj all men wear white? All men wear white garments. And that is to level human beings. No matter how rich you are, how poor you are, we all got on the same two garments. That is the purpose of the ihram, to level us. No matter how rich you are, no matter how poor you are, you got on the same two white pieces of cloth that I have on. And that should be a reminder to you, because those are the same two white pieces of cloth you're going to be wrapped in after your soul is extracted from your body. Hajj is a reminder of death, and it is a reminder of our equality as human beings before God. The institutionalized racism in the pre-Islamic Arab society, designed to continue the hegemony of Quraysh, the ruling elite of Mecca, some of these components included double standards, which we see today in our society, a racist society. Double standards where a man can walk into a mosque and kill 50 people, shoot 50 worshipers, right, and never be called a terrorist. Never. Because the word terrorism is reserved only for Muslims. That term is only reserved. Dylan Roof can walk into a church and kill 8 churchgoers, never labeled as a terrorist. He can walk into a church and murder people, pray with them, and then turn around and murder them. He prayed with them, turn around and murder them. And then the cops took him to Burger King before they actually took him into the police station. Never was he called a terrorist. Facts. Double standards, where a certain set of rules applies to one group of people that don't apply to another, right? Based upon the hierarchy of socioeconomic statuses. The Prophet ﷺ in one hadith where a woman she stole, and the Sahaba were afraid to go tell the Prophet ﷺ because she came from the tribe of Makhzum, one of the more elite tribes in Mecca. So they were afraid to go tell the Prophet ﷺ because, they had to face, and this happens even in Saudi Arabia, a lot of the lower tribes, they take positions like police officers. So some of the elite Saudis, when they run red lights or when they're speeding on the highway and they get pulled over by a police officer, they literally spit in his face. It's nothing. You're not from this tribe or that tribe or whatever. They know that the lower tribe, lower tier tribes are the ones who take positions as police officers and they do the dirty work of the country. But the elite get to run amok, and I don't have to respect you. I've seen it with my own eyes. It's a double standard. One set of rules applies to one that doesn't apply to the other. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, Waymullah, wallahi law anna Fatima bint Muhammad saraqat laqata'tu yadaha. He said, I swear to God, if my own daughter Fatima was to steal, I would cut her hand. There's no double standards. Her hand is going to get cut. There is no double standards. The rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala apply to all across the board. Today, an African American or someone who has an agenda, we can go and expose him that he's been doing this with women, doing that with women, but someone else gets caught, we put him on a plane back to Pakistan, put him on a plane back to somewhere, and all is good. We'll work out all the details behind closed doors. La wallahi. La wallahi. There's no double standard. The same rules apply to everybody across the board. Gender marginalization, I don't even have to go into that. You guys already know the way that women were viewed in pre-Islamic Meccan society. Women were buried alive simply on the basis of the fact that they were women. That should tell you enough. وَالْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. And when the young girl will be asked on the Day of Judgment, for what reason were you killed? For no other reason other than that she was a female. And this, discrimination against another based upon gender. Women were given subpar treatment in a society where they were made to feel less important than those who hold a more powerful and privileged position, right? The women were inherited. If a man was married to a woman and he died, his brother automatically inherited his wife. She didn't have a say-so in the matter. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade that completely when he said, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la yuhillu lakum an tarithu nisaa karaha. All you who believe, it is not permissible for you to inherit women against their will, which means that it is also not permissible to marry a woman against her will. Forced marriages, not permissible. So all of these things, I'm going through all of these things just to kind of lay it out. And the fact of the matter is that while we have it in the Quran, it means absolutely nothing if we don't have people that are going to enforce it. It means absolutely nothing. You got Muslim women now hollering about women's rights. All your rights are laid out for you in the Quran. You just have cowards of men that won't enforce it. That's a fact. That's a fact. I'm not doing this for accolades. That's a fact. Everything, you don't need to advocate for women's rights. Everything that God had for you is already laid out, spelled out for you in the Quran and the Sunnah. The fact of the matter is that most of our men are cowards, and as a result of that, we will not stand up for the rights that these women deserve. So these women got to put themselves out on Front Street, removing their hijab, feeling in fear, feeling anxious, threatened by Islamophobia. Everywhere a Muslim woman goes with the hijab on, the hijab is not just a scarf. The hijab is a representation of Islam. Because as men, we shave our beards, we put on tight jeans, skinny jeans, and we can blend in with everybody else. Leggings, even if. Jeggings. Meanwhile, the woman with the hijab on, she's a threat everywhere she goes. Women should not be the ones standing behind the hijab. It should be men standing behind the hijab, because these are our daughters, these are our women, these are our wives, these are our daughters. How are we going to let women champion the cause of the hijab? You have people like Ibtihaj Muhammad championing the cause of the hijab on a national platform. Where are the men behind her? Where are the men? These are our daughters, these are our wives, these are our sisters in Islam. That should be our responsibility to defend the hijab, not theirs. So, as we can see, the Prophet ﷺ, he said he defended the rights of women, he defended the rights of the poor, the disenfranchised. His role, his responsibility as a prophet was not just to convey revelation. His role as a prophet was to give a voice to the voiceless, not to perpetuate the status quo of the elite. Allah corrected him. Abasa wa tawalla an ja'aka al-a'ma. You turn and you frowned at this blind man because he came to you asking you about Islam. You turn your attention to the elite from Mecca and you abandon this poor old blind man. No, that's not your mission. Your mission is to turn your attention towards the poor. Because when you empower them, they're going to take Islam because they're thirsty. They're going to take Islam to another level. But you focus your attention on the elite, they are more privileged. They're not going to have the same vigor, the same zeal as people who are poor. Poverty creates a thirst, which is why you'll find a lot of people who become very artistic, become very successful. These people started off at the bottom of the pit, the lowest of the low in society. And they hone in on those skill sets that they had, whether it's to draw, whether it's to sing, whether it's, you think about it. These are the people that become the successful ones in society. They become successful to some degree because they don't recognize their potential and they let, these organizations, they let these companies usurp their skills and infringe on their artistry, on their art. And as a result of that, they become puppets. Which is why you find people like, not to mention it, but I mean, it's a fact, but people like Jay-Z, Tidal, I create my own. I don't need to go with Apple and stream my stuff and let you take 75% of my proceeds. I go create my own. This is a person who knows his wealth, knows his worth. When you know your worth, nobody else can use that against you. So let me end with this very important story that happened during the conquest of Mecca. I want you guys to pay attention. I literally fought back tears just writing this. And I'm praying that I have the ability to read it out to you without breaking down. The Prophet ﷺ, in the 23 years that he was a prophet, he addressed all of it. He left no stone unturned as it relates to the classism, the tribalism, the racism that existed amongst the Arabs. After the conquest of Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ did something that no one thought he would do. As we know, the Kaaba was a symbol, a sacred symbol to the Arabs even before Islam. It was very sacred. Even to such a degree that the Arabs were about to go into a tribal war over who was going to put the black stone in its place. And they decided that the next person that walks through this particular threshold, if the next person walks through, they'll let him decide. And it just so happened by the qadr of Allah to be Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was not even a prophet at that time. And they said to him, for him to decide. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in his wisdom, he said, we can all put the black stone in place. Pay attention to that. We can all restore the honor to Islam that it deserves. We can do that together. It doesn't have to be Arabs over here, Desis over here, African Americans over, Hispanics over here, the first Hispanic. We don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. We don't have to fragment our religion up the way that we have done, going after the validation we feel we're not getting from the other groups. We can do that together. So he said the head of each tribe will stand at the corner of the sheet and we'll lift it all together and we'll put the black stone in place. Just trying to give you an idea of how sacred the Kaaba was to the Arabs during that time. After the conquest of Mecca, everyone is standing around. The Prophet ﷺ told Bilal ibn Abi Rabah, Bilal, who used to be a slave, who was from Abyssinia, was from what we know today as Ethiopia. All right, black slave. And the Prophet ﷺ told Bilal, get on top of the Kaaba and call the adhan. All hell broke loose. Are you serious? You're going to let this black slave get on top of the Kaaba and call the adhan? Let me show you some of the sentiments of what was going on when he did this. He told Bilal, after war was over, he told the people of Mecca, I'm not going to fight you. You're free to go. Everybody standing around, the Prophet ﷺ said, Bilal, Qum ya Bilal. Stand up on top of the Kaaba and call the adhan. When he did this, as we know, Bilal was previously tortured. Bilal used to sleep with the animals because he wasn't worthy of sleeping in a home. He used to sleep out in the yard with the animals. Just giving you some idea of how they treated him. However, now he was standing on the most sacred place above the same people who considered him less than. The Prophet was smart. He knew exactly what he was doing. This was all pre-planned. He knew exactly what he was doing. The same people that looked down on him, who he wasn't even worthy of sleeping in a home, he had to sleep in a barn with the animals. They tortured him. They beat him. They sold him to Abu Bakr for more than he was worth because they could do that. They wanted to smite Abu Bakr. They charged him more than what he was actually worth on the market. Now he's standing on top of the Kaaba, the most sacred place to the Arabs, standing looking down on the same people that used to look down on him. SubhanAllah. And he began to call the adhan. The best words that anybody could utter, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And even when he was being tortured, nobody could hear him crying. But now when he called the adhan, everybody heard his voice. Understand? That is our responsibility. The Prophet ﷺ knew exactly what he was doing. He said, Bilal, get on top of the Kaaba and call the adhan. Nobody heard your voice when you were being tortured, when you was just a slave. Now, everybody can hear your voice. You understand? That's our responsibility, to give voice to people who don't have a voice. This is the religion of Islam. This is our responsibility for those of us who had a privileged position. And while Bilal was calling the adhan, some of the elite from Quraysh, they were standing a little bit back and they were having a private conversation. It was Abu Sufyan, who already took his shahada, but he was still cool with men. He still had his loyalty to the chiefs of Quraysh, but he was Muslim. You had Itab ibn Usayd, who was a young boy. Harith ibn Hisham, who was the brother of Abu Jahl, Amr ibn Hisham. And Itab ibn Usayd, he said as he heard Bilal calling the adhan, he said, أكرم الله أسيد يعني والده ألا يكون سمع هذا فسمع منه ما يغيظه ما يغطيه ما وجد محمد غير هذا الغراب الأسود مؤذنا. Itab ibn Usayd, he said, may Allah honor my father that he's dead and he doesn't have to hear this guy calling the adhan on top of the Kaaba. He said, Muhammad couldn't find nobody other than this black crow to stand on top of the Kaaba and call the adhan? He couldn't find nobody other than him? Another one, he said, Harith, who was the brother of Abu Jahl, he said, أَمَا وَاللَّهِ لَوْ أَعْلَمُ أَنَّهُ مُحِقٌّ لَأْتَبَعْتُهُ. He said, Wallahi, if I thought that Bilal was more deserving of being followed, I would follow him, but I'm not following him. This black slave standing on top of the Kaaba calling the adhan. I'm not following that. Abu Sufyan said, لا أقول شيء لو تكلمت لأخبرت عني هذه الحصى. He said, I'm not going to say nothing. Abu Sufyan said, I'm not saying nothing because if I say something, these pebbles, these rocks are going to tell Muhammad what I said. He already knew. I don't want no problems. I'm not saying nothing. He saw the miracles. So he's like, I'm not even going to say nothing because if I say something, one of these rocks is going to talk and tell Muhammad what I said. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam what they said. The Prophet walked over to them and he informed them. He said, you said this. You said that. And Abu Sufyan said, Ya Rasulullah, ma qultu shay'in. He said, oh, Messenger of Allah, I didn't say anything. The Prophet started laughing. فَضَحِكَ النَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. The Prophet started laughing at him. And he realized that, and the two, Aitab and Hadith, the brother Abu Jahl, they both took Shahada right on the spot because they realized that he was a prophet. How could he hear? They knew that could not have been from anyone other than God. Banu Sa'id ibn As, لما رأى بلال يؤذن على الكعبة قالوا لقد أكرم الله سعيدا إذ قبضه قبل أن يرى هذا الأسود على ظهر الكعبة. Tribe of Bani Sa'id, another elite tribe, Ibn al-As, they said, Allah honored Sa'id that he died before he could hear this black individual standing on top of the Kaaba calling him then. I'm just trying to give you an idea of how they saw Bilal, how they saw Miqdad ibn Aswad, how they saw Sumayya, how they saw Zayd, how they saw Usama, and all of the other black companions that was of Arab or African origin. Because Arabs during that time were not as pale as some of the Arabs are today, mixed with European blood. The term Aswad was also used for Arabs during that time as well. And Aswad means black. You can't possibly believe that you live in a region where the sun is actually closer to the earth, is actually very hot, and that people are walking around with pale skin. You can't possibly believe that that's the truth. I'm just being honest with you. The Prophet ﷺ, when he told Bilal to get on top of the Kaaba and called it there, what was he doing? What was he doing? Following orders? Huh? Restoring his honor. What was taken from him? Giving him his rightful place in society as an equal member of society. You don't get to discriminate against someone for generations simply on the color of their skin. And Islam restores that honor. The equilibrium that Islam offers to the Muslims is that anyone can gain knowledge of the religion and assume a position of authority. Anyone. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna Allah yarfa' bihadha al-kitab wa yad'a bihi al-akharin," that Allah will raise with this book some people and He will humiliate some people with this book. Meaning those who learn this book, Allah is going to raise them, and those who refuse to learn will always be at the bottom, humiliated, asking others who have learned about their own religion. This is our religion. This is what we have a responsibility to do, to restore the honor that society has taken from people solely based upon their socioeconomic statuses or based upon the color of their skin. That is our response. That is the responsibility of every single Muslim. If you claim to be a follower of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is your job. Your job is not to create an organization that boasts of, being the biggest Islamic organization in America, and you're raising funds and raising money for people from your country and other countries, and you totally intentionally overlook the poor, the disenfranchised, the marginalized population right here in your own vicinity. That is against the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. You don't get to organize a 3-day conference and invite the most elite scholars and speakers and charge an astronomical fee to get in, and people who don't have money, people who don't have finances, don't have, the means. They're not even a factor. You're preaching to the choir. I'm just trying to figure out how we are organizing these 3-day Islamic events, conferences, and we're preaching to the same choir. The people who really need to hear that message are not there. How you set up a dawah center. You set up a dawah center, right? We giving dawah, and you open up a dawah center in your suburbs, not too far from your mosque. Go into the inner city and the urban areas and open up your dawah center. Cowards. You want to stay close to home and open up a dawah center close to a Walmart, close to your Islamic center. Go into the inner city and give those people dawah. Because those people, when they convert to Islam, you're going to see a change in their environment. Look at what Imam Siraj and the community in Brooklyn did to Bedford, Fulton Avenue. That is what happened when people in the inner cities convert to Islam. They turn an entire corner that used to be drug infested with prostitutes, turn it into an Islamic center, where Muslims and non-Muslims feel comfortable now walking up and down the streets of Brooklyn as a result of people who converted to Islam. You understand? Not people who, in the suburbs who convert to Islam and, you lose yourself into some, different practices of the religion and not to contribute anything to your society. Very few. If you want to look at the game changers in Islamic history here in America, look towards African American Muslims. They have changed. African American Muslims have made it possible for some of the immigrants who came here to practice Islam. Many of you who wear hijab today, you wear hijab today off of the backs of many of our grandparents who were Muslims, although a part of the Nation of Islam or different branch of Islam or different approach to Islam, nonetheless, it was Islam. It was Islam according to how much they understood it. And we don't get to come today and to completely dismiss that and say, oh, they were off it, they didn't understand Islam. They worked within the capacity that they had, with the knowledge that they had, and better believe they did more with very little than we do with a lot. We can run down every ayah in the Quran, every hadith, we can run it down to you. But what status quo have we changed? What have we changed? How have we challenged the societies that we live in now? With all of this great knowledge that you got people talking about don't listen to him, don't take from him, as if he is this big guy with all this knowledge. But what have you done? Nothing. You sat behind a computer, sat in your masjid, reading from one book to the next, and you have affected no change in your environment. You're pure theory. That's all you are. Theory. That's all you are, is a theory. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya ayyuhal mudaththir, qum fa'anzir. Oh, you wrapped in garments, get up out of your house and go. The work is outside of the mosque, not in the mosque. We preach into the choir. All these elaborate khutbahs every Friday. Go out into the community and call the people to Islam. Invest time into our young people. You got a guy giving a lecture and everybody sitting in your lecture got gray in their beard. What they gonna do? Sitting there with red henna in your beard. What you gonna do? Walking on a crutch. You can barely breathe. No, wallahi, I'm just being honest with you. What type of change are you going to affect in a society? Meanwhile, we have brushed our youth off as being, they don't understand Islam. They're so far away from Islam. You guys understand Islam. The fact of the matter is that you don't have a leader. That's your problem. Your problem is not that you don't understand Islam, you don't love Islam. You haven't found a leader that you can get behind, that you feel comfortable. That's the problem. And I pray that one day from amongst you emerges a leader who is not afraid to speak truth to power, whether within our ranks or without our ranks. That is the examples that have been left behind for us from all of the Sahaba. Not afraid to speak truth to power. From Musa speaking truth to power to with Fir'aun. With Asiya, the wife of Fir'aun, who spoke truth to his power and died as a result of it. You have many Muslim women now being tortured in your homes. Stand up on your own 2 feet and stop acting like a damsel in distress. You have a legacy of women to follow. What are you waiting for? Your leaders are in the Quran. Stop waiting for your leaders in the mosque. Ain't no leaders in the mosque. Your leaders are in the Quran. Musa, Harun, Ibrahim, Ismail, Ishaq, Yaqub, Yusuf, Asiya, Maryam. Your leaders are in the Quran. If you're waiting for a leader to emerge from the mosque that's going to give that one khutbah that's going to make you, please don't hold your breath. All the leaders that you need, all of the leadership you need is in that book. Until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows one to emerge from amongst us who is not afraid to speak truth to power. Until then, all of the leadership that you need is right in that book, in the Quran. And we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He forgives us for any misrepresentation of His religion that we have done. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He inspires, allows us what we've heard here tonight and the energy that is shared between us in this room tonight, that it inspires one of us to take our religion just a step further. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that someone from amongst you, women and men, emerge as leaders in the Islamic community. Stop running behind these titles of student of knowledge and Imam. Those are just titles. We're the leaders. Where are the leaders in the Islamic community? Someone come here now from another country and say, well, who's the leader of the Muslim community here in America? We quote this person, that person. Leaders. I'm talking about people who have vision, who are willing to take the Ummah to the next level. That's what I'm talking about. And we pray, and there's someone in this room that's going to be that. Multiple individuals in this room. You just take the right spark. And I pray that tonight you had that spark. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you all for your patience. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathira. Wa akhiru da'wana an alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So here's the fun part of every lecture conference is always questions and answers. I'm not really particular of questions and answers. I think sometimes we ask questions and answers because we don't want the night to end. We're enjoying the time and the energy, and I'm cool with enjoying the time and energy with you. We don't have to ask questions and answer questions to spend time with each other. You had me for the rest of the night. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. We don't have to ask questions just to be cool, just to kick it. We can enjoy the time that we have for one. We don't have to create questions. I don't actually get a kick out of that. It says, how do we combat microaggressions as people of color without losing our temper? I mean, that's a simple question. Microaggressions, meaning sometimes people have this passive-aggressive behavior, microaggressive behavior, like similar to what I mentioned. Oh, you speak Arabic, really nice. And I think the way to combat that is to use every opportunity as a teaching moment. To use it as a teaching moment. When you say, oh, you speak Arabic very well, you say, well, let me ask you a question. How else would I speak Arabic, if I took, 3-4 years out of my life, I went to this institute, I learned, I studied. It's like, oh, okay, I got it. No, I want you to understand why I speak Arabic. It's not because I've been given some special gift. It's because I put in some work. It's a teaching moment. It doesn't have to be disrespect. You don't have to meet microaggression with another microaggression, because then that would make you no different than the other person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, idfa' billati hiya ahsan. Repel evil with what is better. Use every moment as a teaching moment. That's how we combat that. All right? There's no need to get your temper involved, because some people do it inadvertently. They don't even know that they're doing it. And if you know that that energy is coming from a place, that now the onus is on you to take the opportunity to teach the person. Today, you're going to learn, right? In the words of Kevin Hart, you're going to learn today. You're going to learn today. Today is your day to learn, all right? And sometimes we have to take time, like, we say all the time, today I got time. I got time today. You're going to learn. I'm going to make this a moment for you. Because when you take the time out and you educate a person, they will never do it to someone again. Inshallah. They will never do it. The Prophet said that the believer doesn't get stung in the same hole twice. I believe that. That when you educate me, I said something wrong. I remember one time I used the phrase packy at a lecture. And a brother came up to me and he said, as a Desi, we actually take that as offensive. And I said, I didn't know that. And he educated me. He took time out. You're going to learn today. And I learned. So I refrained from using that term. If he had walked away, disgruntled, upset, I ain't never listening to him again, what does that solve? That solves nothing. I'm still going to turn around in another lecture and I'm going to make the same mistake over again. When you take the time out and you explain, you say, hey, that's really offensive. You shouldn't really say things like that. In my culture, we see that it's like, Jazakallah khair, I appreciate that. I didn't know that. And now I know. You understand? So the way to combat microaggressions, not just people with color, because people of African American Muslims, we are not the only ones that experience, discrimination or prejudice against people. All right? I myself, as an African American, sometimes when I go into an African American masjid, I'm met with microaggressions. So I can only imagine with someone who is of Pakistani origin or Arab origin, what you experience when you go into an African American masjid. It's like, brother, put your foot here. This is sunnah, Aki. It's like, but you're stepping on my foot, brother. That's not the sunnah. Like, you're stepping on my foot. I can feel your corn through your sock. Like, that's not the sunnah. Have mercy. You understand? Like, we as African Americans experience microaggressions amongst ourselves. So we're not the only group that experiences microaggressions from people from other groups. But the way to handle that is to make it a teaching moment. Not walk away disgruntled, upset. Not, like Umar radiallahu anhu, he was in the masjid and he saw two people raising their voice in the masjid. So he took a pebble and he hit the guy in the back with the pebble. And he got their attention and he asked them, Min aina antuma? He said, where are you two from? Because obviously they're not from Medina raising their voice in the masjid like that. They know people in Medina know better. So he asked them, he said, where are you two from? They said, we're from Ta'if. We're from a city not too far out from Mecca, not too far from Mecca. And Umar said, Wallahi law kuntuma min al-Madina la awja'tukum al-daraba. He said, Wallahi, if you guys were from Medina, I would beat both of you, raising your voice in the masjid. It was a teaching moment. You're going to learn today. You understand? It's a teaching moment. Don't raise your voice in the masjid. He didn't get disgruntled and go off into a corner and backbite the people like we do today. Right? Sister come in, she has on a hijab, t-shirt, spandex. Right? You don't know her story. You don't know her why. But then you're off in the corner somewhere talking astaghfirullah. Oh, a'udhu billah. Look at how she's in the masjid. Why don't you go over and say something to her? Why not use the moment as a teaching moment rather than incurring sin on yourself by backbiting? I don't understand the logic. I don't understand it. To go over to the sister and say, Assalamu alaikum, what's your name? Hey, how you doing? You do know that, you have on pants. Like, can I give you my overgarment so you can pray? And she might tell you, well, I just, got out of a bad relationship. Or I just happened to pass by this masjid and I just wanted to come in and pray. I haven't prayed in weeks. I haven't prayed in months. And I just happened to be walking past the masjid and something said, go in. And I just came as I am. And if you don't take the time out to understand a person's why, then you are not in a privileged position to judge. You don't know what the person's why is. And if you don't take the time out to ask the person their why, then you are not granted a position to judge. Because you don't have the facts to judge. So your judgment is going to be misplaced because you don't have enough information to formulate a judgment. So it's a teaching moment. Use it as a teaching moment. How do you correct or bring your parents to the awareness that the way they are taught concerning race or colorism is wrong without being disrespectful or demeaning? That's a tough one because the way that we as African Americans interact with our parents is totally different than the way that other cultural groups interact with their parents. Some cultural groups, the relationship between parents, father and son, mother and daughter, is more like a dictatorship. It's like whatever I say is, and you don't have a right to challenge me. You don't have a right to say anything about what I say goes, all right? That type of parenting is really hard to challenge that type of parenting because that type of parenting can become very confrontational. So you have to choose your words wisely. You have to choose the times and the situations and how you approach the situation. And you know your parents better than anyone. If you hear your parents use a derogatory term, you have to find a way. Even if you have an older sibling that has a better rapport with the parent, then maybe you could, find a way to do that. But there has to be a strategic way that you approach that so that our parents know you can't say things like that. Even with our younger siblings, you have many Arabs and Desi children now. I work in an Islamic school, and we just suspended a kid Yemeni kid for using the term nigga. Understand? And it's very common. Don't say, oh, it's common. They use it all day, every day. You right here in New York, they don't use nigga? Come on, my nigga. Stop playing, nigga. They use that all day, every day. Like, why you acting so surprised? But it becomes your responsibility. Your younger brother, you hear him using that term. Yo, dude, don't use that. That's not cool, man. Understand the origin of that. And when people say, well, black people call themselves, we earn the right to call each other nigga. We earn that. Understand? We earn that. Don't ever say, well, they call each other niggas. Yeah, so what? We earn the right to do that. That's called embracing your stigma. Embracing your stigma. Although I personally don't use it, my children don't necessarily use it, but at the same token, when we hear our younger siblings using it, it becomes a responsibility to correct it on the spot. Don't use that language around me. Don't use that around me. All right? And definitely don't use it yourself. It's not cool. It is not cool. And it's not even something that you should want to say if you understand the origin of it, where it comes from, and why it was used. It's degrading. It's disrespectful, and it's something that we should hold ourselves to a higher standard to use that type of language. All right. If that's it on the questions, inshallah, we'll stop here. Yeah, go for it.
So, of course, as we try to use all of our means possible to us to enact institutional change, there is the onus on each of us as an individual. So I would like to ask you, like, for a lot of us here who do go to the Islamic convention or things like that, what we can do as individuals to leave our mark positively on the community there instead of just going there for the convention and leaving not.
That's what I'm talking about right there. See that thought right there? That's what I'm talking about right there. Allahu Akbar. That's what I'm talking about. She said, rather than now that you've been brought up to speed, your consciousness, your awareness has been peaked at this point, awakened. Now it becomes a responsibility on you. Now you don't just go to an ISNA conference with your eyes wide shut. Now you go in with a different level of consciousness, a different thinking. How do we now bring that to their attention? How do we affect change now within that circle rather than just going to the convention, going to the conference for the next 3 days and not saying anything or doing anything? How do we affect change within that circle? That starts with the question, why aren't there any African American Muslim speakers? That's a question. That's a question that I have wanted to ask for such a long time. Why? How do you have a roster of 21 speakers in 3 days and not one of them is an African American? In Baltimore. I don't understand why. I need a logical explanation for that. I demand, as someone who supports your organization, I demand an explanation for that. And if they, the response, I don't know what type of political response is going to be given, but I do know that that is a problem. Because when you look out into the crowd, there are African Americans in the crowd that come there, that support their events, that come there to benefit. And don't you think that it would be great for an African American child to look up on a platform like ISNA, the one that ISNA offers, to look out into that platform and to see somebody that looks like them, speaking their language, speaking to their experiences? Don't you think that that would leave a greater impact? Rather than whitewashing your entire, convention or conference to make yourselves look like you've arrived. White is the Eurocentric worldview. White is not right. Whitewashing your organization does not make it, elite. Doesn't make it right. If it's not serving the needs of the people, then you've missed your point. Because we are not here for ourselves. We are here for you. We are here to serve, like Muslims in positions of teaching and organizational structures. This is about servicing the people, not about ourselves. So if the people are demanding a more diverse speaking, arrangement, then servicing the people is what we're here to do. Diversify your speakers. And I mean, let's take it a step further. Even when you go to these institutes, Al-Maghrib Institute, this institute, that institute, we're the African-American instructors. Maybe one token Negro. No, that's what it is. You got your one token Negro, so you can say, well, we got African American. Yeah, you got 1 out of 20. You want a cookie. You got 1 out of 20. MashaAllah. I mean, like that's so I can say, we're not racist. We cater to the diverse group. Right. You got one, like I got my one black friend. Like I have a black friend. Where can we learn more about these facts? You can start with a book that was written by Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow. You can start there. And wherever that takes you, because she got a slew of references at the back of that book, that'll take you wherever you need to go. Connect the dots. Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow. And there's also Tariq Nasheed. He has a list of documentaries on YouTube. What's the name of it? Hidden Colors. There you go. As a matter of fact, yes, 4 of them. You go Tariq Nasheed on YouTube. Yes. My guy. Use a lot of profanity sometimes, but he be on point. On point. Dr. Umar Johnson. My dude. Got some stuff with him, but I'm not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And that's another thing we do as African Americans. We find one thing wrong with the person and we throw everything out. No, some of the stuff that he said is true. Haq. Huh? Nah. That's a little too deep. That's going a little too deep. There you go. You got all the resources you need right here in this room, man. People will point you in the right direction. But Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, that will definitely open your eyes to the prison industrial complex, how George Bush and Bill Clinton, how they ran their entire campaigns on the war against drugs, which was actually a war on the black family, the black community. Say it again. I can't hear you. Does it go into those facts? Yes. Yes. In a modern vernacular, she uses modern day, terms that we can relate to. Some books just are like really deep on a academic level. No. She's very simple, lays out the facts. Absolutely.
Can I just say that?
Sure, go for it.
Understand that not all black Americans were slaves.
Right.
That we were the Aborigines.
There you go.
Okay? We are the Aborigines. We not the we are the black Aborigines. Way before those skin became pale, we were the people who were here on this land.
There you go.
And we were the people who built this land, even though we don't own anything, because they found all kinds of ways to destroy it with institutional racism. But we are
Absolutely.
the original people on this land.
Absolutely.
Now, every black American is a slave or was a slave.
Right. We didn't all come here on boats from Africa, is what she's saying to you. That's another, you can add that with Christopher Columbus discovered America. You can add that with that myth. All black people did not come here on a boat from Africa, which is why the Saudi guy, when I said I was from America, he couldn't accept that. Because in his mind, anyone that is American is white. Not realizing that there were aboriginals, people who meaning owner, taking ownership, the original people who owned this land. And there were people who were here, who look like me, look like every other African American in here, that were here long before Christopher Columbus, long before the Native Americans. You understand? This is what you're not going to get in high school. You understand? Because your world history books are Eurocentric. Here again, your world history books are designed to make you believe that Europe, the world, that everything that Europe encompasses. Okay. We have this Eurocentric view where everything out of Europe came to put everything in order. Meanwhile, while they were in the Dark Ages, you had empires all over Africa. Anyway, we're going to end now, inshallah ta'ala. As again, we have some books. I have some books outside. The Paradox of Change. This is a book that I wrote for new female converts. It is the new Muslim's guide to overcoming obstacles. And any woman can read it and benefit from it. I have another book called He Came to Perfect Moral Character, which is my biography. Starts off with how I converted to Islam, all of my struggles, and then it becomes a self-help book using the Prophet ﷺ as an example. I wrote the book using the foundation for the book, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. I took that same concept and I wrote a book from an Islamic perspective using the Prophet ﷺ as the foundation for that concept. It's called He Came to Perfect Moral Character. Also, my wife has a couple of books out there. One is My Brown Face is Beautiful, which is a kid's book. If you're a teacher, this is an excellent book, excellent read for your children. If you're a mom or dad, this is an excellent read for your kids. And there's some other books, inshallah ta'ala, out there. So support black businesses. Jazakumullah khairan. You guys have been awesome. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. Wa sallallahu ala nabi Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum.